Tesla just changed the rules on everyday charging. New nickel-based cells let you set 90% as your daily limit, cut long-term fade, and keep the performance punch without babying the pack. No gimmicks, just a real upgrade you feel on weekday mornings and long weekends alike. Here is what changed inside the cathode and why your next charge routine gets simpler. The reveal that slipped past the noise. The message arrived without a keynote or a countdown because Tesla's vice president of vehicle engineering said during a segment on a mainstream car show that the company's next-generation nickel-based battery technology is sufficiently durable that Tesla plans to recommend a daily charge limit 90% for vehicles equipped with these cells, which immediately reframes ownership habits in markets where nickel chemistries dominate and effectively gives drivers more usable energy every day without changing pack size, hardware footprint, or the rhythm of their lives. And it matters that this was not rumor, but words from the executive responsible for the vehicles themselves. This guidance is especially relevant in the United States, where most Teslas ship with nickel chemistries rather than lithium iron phosphate, because a higher everyday limit translates into an immediate increase in practical range for commuting, spontaneous errands, and late afternoon plan changes that used to force a stop. And while the difference between 80 and 90% sounds modest on paper, in the rhythms of real life, that extra 10% often determines whether you head straight home or take the scenic route without thinking twice. So if tomorrow morning your app slider quietly moves from the old habit to the new recommendation, how quickly would your routine adapt to the extra cushion you did not even know you were missing? Why 90% changes the conversation. For years, nickel-based packs were treated like athletes who needed a careful training plan, since they offered the energy density and power that make long-range and performance trims feel effortless, yet asked owners to be more conservative in daily charging to limit calendar aging, while lithium iron phosphate enjoyed a reputation for cost, stability, and tolerance of full state of charge at the expense of packing fewer watt hours into the same volume, which meant that buyers often chose between simplicity and stamina, and service advisors repeated the same guidance that became folklore in owner forum. When the company responsible for so many nickel-based cars says the next iteration can comfortably live at 90% day after day, that convenience gap narrows in a way owners can feel on a weekday morning rather than in a spec sheet, because you do not need to schedule a road trip to benefit and you do not need to relearn your car. You simply start the day with more energy available and less anxiety about long-term pack health, and that is precisely the sort of incremental advantage that compounds over years and miles. If the sprinter suddenly behaves like a marathoner in daily life while keeping its top speed, does the old either-or choice still make sense? The chemistry hidden inside the headline. The quiet hero behind this shift is the cathode, because Tesla filed and publicized work on doped cathode active materials and the methods to make them, and doping in this context means intentionally introducing tiny amounts of other elements into the crystal structure, so the material resists the mechanisms that normally erode capacity over thousands of cycles, which is not marketing flourish, but classic materials engineering that hardens the most fragile links in the chain, so voltage, temperature, and repeated intercalation do not carve away performance as quickly as before. Summaries of the company's technical documents describe a meaningful improvement in retention, with older cathodes holding a smaller share of initial capacity under long life conditions, while doped versions hold substantially more, and commentary on the same approach notes that a particular multi-element recipe kept degradation surprisingly low over the same period in which a non-doped reference cell lost far more capacity, which is exactly the sort of result that would justify changing daily state of charge guidance from 80 to 90% without treating owners as unpaid beta testers. If the lattice itself keeps its shape deeper into life, how long before your battery outlasts the rest of the car's moving parts? From studio conversation to owner habits. It matters that this update did not arrive as a rumor or a third-hand leak, because the message was delivered plainly and then echoed by communities that follow engineering closely, with the emphasis remaining the same, namely that the new nickel-based chemistry is durable enough to support 90% on a daily basis, and that the convenience gap with lithium iron phosphate is now half what it used to be, which lands less like a boast and more like a steady recalibration of how owners should treat their packs the moment these cells enter production cars. For drivers, the difference appears in small mercies that add up, because commuters can skip a midweek top-up, Fleets can shave a stop from a shift, and families can accept an unexpected detour without the mental math that used to accompany any day that drifted beyond routine. And the beauty of this kind of improvement is that it hides in plain sight, since no one needs a new charging ritual or a deep dive into battery science to enjoy it. If convenience is the currency that wins mainstream adopters, is this the quiet change that moves the needle more than a new badge ever could? Nickel and LFP after the upgrade. None of this means lithium iron phosphate loses its place, because LFP still wins on cost, stability, and stress-free full charge tolerance, and remains a natural fit for standard range trims and many fleet applications. Yet the historical complaint that nickel packs felt fussy in everyday use loses force if the owner guidance climbs to 90% while the pack retains more of its capacity deeper into life, which means buyers can select a chemistry based on energy density, packaging, and performance needs without feeling pressured by maintenance anxiety or different rules for the same school run. That balance is exactly what long-term adoption requires, because mainstream drivers do not want to memorize battery etiquette. They want a car that behaves consistently, and if nickel now carries the legs of a grand tourer and the manners of a daily commuter, then showroom conversations change from warnings about upper limits to simple discussions about how far you travel and how you like your power delivered, which is the kind of clarity that makes choices easier rather than harder. When both chemistries feel simple and one gives you more miles per kilogram, which knob do you turn first? Cost, weight, or headroom? What the patent hints about direction. The doped cathode work sits alongside a broader thread of innovations that focus on strengthening active materials and simplifying high-volume manufacturing, because the company has pursued recipes and processes that reduce capacity, fade in manganese-rich and nickel-rich systems, and has paired that chemistry focus with production approaches that cut solvents, speed lines, and lower cost. And while those factory innovations are their own story, they support the same end state by making it viable to bring better materials to scale rather than leaving them on a lab bench. This is why the 90% guidance matters beyond owner convenience, which means buyers can select a chemistry based on energy density, packaging, and performance needs without feeling pressured by maintenance anxiety or different rules for the same school run. That balance is exactly what long-term adoption requires, because mainstream drivers do not want to memorize battery etiquette. They want a car that behaves consistently, and if nickel now carries the legs of a grand tourer and the manners of a daily commuter, then showroom conversations change from warnings about upper limits to simple discussions about how far you travel and how you like your power delivered,